Today we're going to be working in Lesson 14 of Excel, dealing with several types of if functions. We're going to start off with an actual function called if and talk about how to utilize it. Then we're going to look at three similar functions. One is SumIF, which adds numbers if a condition is met. CountIF, which will count numbers if a condition has been met. And then finally AverageIF, which will average a group of numbers if a condition has been met. Here we are in Lesson 14 of our book. We're going to proceed to the following page, 452. Page 452, and here we will have the Excel file that we need to download. The file name is E14Try. If you're working in the classroom, we can go to Class Files, IIT, Excel, Chapter 2, and we can find that same E14Try file. Once the file is open, we're going to save this file. So we're going to do a Save As, direct it to our Documents folder, create a folder with today's date, and then add our initials to the end of this file name. In this lesson, the first thing we're going to talk about is something called an if function. Basically, we use an if function whenever there's two possible outcomes for a particular cell. Let's take an example. Please go to cell F4. What we want to do is we want either the word yes or the word no to appear here where it says unit goal met. And here's how Excel needs to decide whether to put a yes or a no in there. The unit goal for each one of these items is to sell 20 bars of whatever candy the row represents. So in the case of row 4, the goal is to sell 20 bars of toffee. Okay? So, as we look at row 4, we need to determine what would be the correct answer. Well, hopefully you would have answered no, because 17 bars were sold, which is less than the 20. So, if we were going to manually do this, we would type in the word no for the first cell. The second cell coming down for column F, okay? If my goal was 20 bars of chocolate almond bars, then I would put a yes in here, because that goal was met. At least 20 bars were sold. Now, the issue though is I don't want to have to go through and type, although there's only 16 or 17 rows here, wouldn't be that big a deal to type that in. What I want to do is I want Excel to calculate this value for us. And the way that we do this is with a function called if. Now, if you click the drop down, I'm assuming you're in cell F4. If you click on the drop down, you will see a list of functions that are automatically available. If the if function is not currently visible here, so we're going to have to go to more functions. Now, if you wanted to go directly to this box, we could have clicked on the insert function button, and that would be fine. Now, I know that the function I want is called if, so where this insert function is, type a brief description. I'm going to type in if and click go. At this point, it brings up a list of functions that might relate to that word if, And I'm going to click on this if function right here and click OK. Now, I need to enter in what are called arguments. Now, my suggestion is that you take and move this box. I'm pointing at the title bar for this box. I'm going to drag this down, and so that the top of the box kind of underlines the row that I'm wanting to look at. What that does is two things. Number one is it hides the extra stuff that I don't need to see, and it kind of helps me see the numbers on the row that I'm specifically working on. Now, we need to come up with what's called a logical test. A logical test is simply, how do I decide whether to put, in this case, a yes or a no in place? Well, the way I decide that is based on the value of cell D4. If you are looking at this and deciding whether to just type the word in yes or no, you're going to look at D4. So let's click on D4. Okay? Now, a logical test always has to be some cell and then some kind of an operator, which means it would be an equal sign, a greater than sign, or a less than sign. So what I want to do is I want to find out if D4 is greater than, so I'm going to type in the greater than symbol, but I want this to be greater than or equal to, so I'm also going to type in the equal symbol. So my logical test so far is D4, is it greater than or equal to, and now I'm going to type in the number. The number is 20. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at D4 and I'm saying, is this number greater than or equal to 20? If it is, okay, if D4 is greater than 20, which I know it's not looking at it here, but we need to put something in for the true value. If that number was greater than 20, I would like to type in the word yes. But if the number is not greater than 20, the thing I want to put in this cell is the word no. So, here's how the if function is working. It's going to look at D4 and compare that to the number 20. Is it greater than or equal to 20? If so, it puts in a yes. If not, it puts in a no. I click OK. And as it should, it put in the answer no for this particular row. Now, let's click on that formula, cell F4, and let's copy that formula down to row F21. Now, I want to do a quick spot check here. I want to look and see, did the yes work? Okay, so I look at the yes, and sure enough, that row, the number is 20 or greater. The next row, it's greater than 20. The next row, not greater than 20, so it is a no, which is what it should be. So my if function is indeed working in this situation. Now, I want to figure out if the dollar goal has been met. So in this case, I'm going to go to cell G4. And in cell G4, we're going to do basically the same thing as we did before, but this time, instead of looking at the number sold, I want to look at the dollar value sold. And if the dollar value is at least $50, I want this to be a yes. Otherwise, I want it to be a no. So, looking at the first row, we look and see, did we meet the dollar value? That would be a no. So what I want in here eventually is the word no. However, I want to let Excel do the calculation for us. This time, since I know the if function was not on my AutoSum button, I'm going to come up and click on the Insert Function button. Because we just used if a moment ago, it's already on my list, so I'm going to click on the if function and click OK. Once again, I'm going to take this box and I'm going to move it so that it kind of underlines the row in which I'm trying to do the calculation for. Alright, now I need to decide what my logical test is. So if you were going to type something in here manually, what cell would you look at in order to calculate that? Hopefully you answered the E4 cell. So we're going to click on that E4. Now, what I want to do is put in an operator. In this case, again, it's going to be a greater than or equal to operator. Greater than or equal to. I want to see if E4 is greater than or equal, and the dollar amount that's kind of my guiding factor is $50. So I'm going to type in 50. So, E4 greater than or equal to 50. If it is greater than 50, I want the value of yes to appear. If it isn't greater than 50, I want the value of no to appear. I click on the OK button, and that will do the calculation and put the word no in this case, which is correct because my dollar amount is less than 50. So what I'm going to do now is copy this down to G21, and now I want to do a spot check just like I did before. I'm going to go to the next cell down. I want to see, is the dollar amount more than 50? It is, and it's properly listing this as a yes. In the next row, again, 7425 is the number, so that should be a yes as well. So my if function seems to be doing what it's supposed to be doing and putting in either yeses or nos in the appropriate spots. The next function that I'm going to be demonstrating is the SumIF function. And for this, we're going to go to cell J4, in which we're going to look and see how much money did Tamika Brown make. Well, here's the challenge. I could sum the sales for Tamika Brown, and that would give me the correct number. The problem with that is that'll only work so long as this list is in order by member name. If somebody came in and sorted this, say by candy bar, and all the toffee bars were at the top, okay, all the mint were in the middle and all the chocolate bars were at the bottom, well then Tamika's are not going to all be the first cells, and therefore this number would end up being incorrect. So that's why we're going to use the SumIF function. Now, you're going to find out in a little bit that when we use the SumIF function, I need to have a list of all the names. So we're going to use what we learned about last class, and that is what's called a named range. If you will, please select from A4 down to A21. And what I want to do is I want to give this group of cells a name. To make it simple, I'm going to give it, in essence, the same name that's the column header, but you may remember we can't use spaces. So I'm going to come up here to the name box, and I'm going to type in member name, but I'm not going to put a space between member and name. So member name, all one word, and I press enter. Similarly, I'm going to need to use all of my sales in this formula. So I'm going to select from E4 to E21. I'm selecting all of the sales. And in order to make it easy to remember, I'm going to go up to my name box and I'm going to type in total sales with no space, because I can't use spaces in my names. And I press enter. Alright, so I now have my total sales amount and I have my member name amount. Let's go back to cell J4, and we're now ready to enter in the SumIF function. So I'm going to go to my AutoSum, click the drop down. SumIF is not on my list, so I'm going to click on More Functions. At this point, I'm going to type in SumIF, no space, SumIF, and click Go. And that will display my SumIF function. I'm going to click on SumIF, click OK. Alright, I'm going to move this so that I can see the cell that I want to work with. Alright, the range. What is the range? The range is the group of cells that you want evaluated. So in other words, that's my member name. So in other words, I only want to add the total sales if the member name is Tamika. So the range that I want to look at is this member name. So I can now select all of those names, and notice that it puts that range name in there that we came up with earlier called member name. I could have typed member name. That would have worked as well. Alright, criteria. Well, the one that I want for this cell is Tamika Brown. Now, I could type Tamika Brown in here, but I'm going to click on this cell here with Tamika's name. Part of the reason why I want to do that is so that when I copy it down, it will change from Tamika to Caitlin, and so it'll automatically then look for Caitlin's total. Now let's go to the sum range. The sum range are the cells that are going to be added. Okay? In this case, we're going to add up our total sales. Now, I could type in the range name of total sales, or I can select all of this, and it would put in the range name that I gave it of total sales. So, reviewing what we've done, I've told it to look at member name column. If the member name was equal to I4, Tamika Brown, then I wanted it to add that person's sales. I click OK, and that gives me a total of $170. Now let's check that to make sure that it's right. I'm going to take my mouse and just select the sales for Tamika, and I'm going to look down here on my status bar, and sure enough it does equal that 170. So that is a correct value. Now, because I did this using the named ranges, and for the criteria I used the cell reference of I4, I should be able to copy this down. Looking at the next one, once I've copied it down to J9, okay, what I'm doing now is I'm looking at J5 at the formula. SumIF, looking at member name, that's fine, but it's looking at I5, which is Caitlin. That's exactly what I wanted it to do, and it's adding up the total sales. Again, if I wanted to do another double check, what I could do is select Caitlin's sales, look at the bottom of the spreadsheet, it says 135, which does match our SumIF amount. So, this seems to be working pretty good. If I really wanted to check one last thing, I would look at John Baker. I would select John Baker's sales, confirm that the sum is the same value here as it is here. Alright, The next thing I want to do is I want to come down here to cell I-19 and I want to change the label. The label that's there is much more complicated than we need. And so let's do this. Let's just say total sales. So I'm giving this the label of total sales. And what we want to do is I want to calculate how much money was made selling toffee bars. I want to know how much money was made selling chocolate almond bars and how much money was made selling mint bars. Well, this is the same type of function that we did up here where we want to sum, we wish to add the sales amount if the if the candy is mentioned here. So let's go to cell, we need to name this range. So I'm going to select from B4 down to B21, and we're going to give this the range name of candy. So I'm going to type in candy and press enter, and that will give this group of cells that name. Now that we've named that range, we're ready to do our SumIF function. So I'm going to go to cell J20, and I'm going to click the drop down. SumIF is what I'm looking for. It's not on my list, so I'm going to go to more functions. I do see SumIF on my list here because I've already used it today. So I click on SumIF and click OK. Now my range, in this case, is going to be my candy bars. Okay? I want to look at my candy bar. So I'm going to select those candy bars, and that's going to put in the range name of candy. Alternatively, I could have typed candy in there and that would have been acceptable. Now, for the criteria, when do I want to add the numbers? Well, in this case, the row I'm on, I want to add the numbers if it's a toffee bar. So I'm going to click on this I-20, the toffee bar, okay, as the criteria. So I want to look at the list of candy bars. I want to pick out the ones that are toffee bars. And what do I want to do? Well, where it says sum range, what I want it to add, just moving this out of the way here, what I want to add is the total sales. So I've selected from E4 down to E21, which is put in the range name that we created of total sales. Okay? And so what it's going to do is look in the candy column for instances of toffee bars and add the total sales for toffee bars. I click OK, and there's my calculation. I can copy this down to the next two cells. I'm going to click on J21 and take a look at my function. It's going to sum. It's going to look at the candy column. That's what I want it to do. It's looking for I-21. Well, I-21 is chocolate almond bars. That's what I want it to do. So it's going to pick out the chocolate almond bars and add the total sales value. That's exactly what I want it to do. So we have successfully done that. Now, in the same way we just did total sales, we can do our average sales. You might need to scroll down to get to this one. Clicking on cell J25, average sales for toffee bars, I want to do in essence the same thing we did before, but this time, instead of calculating the total amount, I want to find out how much each person on average sold of toffee bars. So in other words, in essence, I would take the toffee bars for Tamika, take that number, and add it to the toffee bars for Caitlin, add it to the coffee bars for Jolene. I'd add all those up, and then divide it by the number of people we have, which looks like is 6. Again, you don't have to worry about that calculation. Excel is going to do it for us. So here I am in cell J25, and I'm looking for a function called AverageIF. So I'm going to go to my AutoSum, come down to AverageIF is not in the list, so I'm going to go to More Functions. I'm going to type in AverageIF, all one word, AverageIF. Click Go. Here's my AverageIF function. With it selected, I click OK. My range, once again, is my list of candy bars. So I'm going to select from B4 down to B21. And when I do that, it should put in the range name of candy. The criteria for the first one is toffee bars. I'm going to click on toffee bars to the left here. Now the average range is going to be those total sales numbers. So I'm going to select all my total sales numbers. That's from E4 to E21. It should put in the range name in there for me. I click OK. And it then calculates the average person sold $44.25 in toffee bars. Now I'm going to drag this formula down 2 cells. Chocolate almond bars had an average of $53.75, whereas mint bars sold an average of $61.41. So I can tell by looking at this that mint bars had the most sales because its average is the highest. So AverageIF will look in this case at the candy bars, look for this particular candy bar for the first row, and then average the total sales amount. That brings to a conclusion Lesson 14, in which we looked at the if function, the SumIF function, and the AverageIF function. In your practice exercise, you're going to get a chance to practice the COUNTIF function as well, which is a little easier than the SumIF and AverageIF. In this lesson, we looked at the if function for calculating a situation where I wanted to put in a yes, a no, an up, a down, a left, a right. Anytime I've got 2 possible choices that would go into a cell, the if function's a good one. SumIF allows me to add if a certain condition has been met. We didn't look at COUNTIF, but you will be in your practice exercise. COUNTIF is very similar to SumIF, except there's one less thing you have to do, which you will see in the apply that you'll be doing. And then the last item that we did cover was the AverageIF, which works in the same way as summing, except it does an average instead of summing.